welcome back to ClayDesk, your number one channel for e-learning and, of course, all of the latest technology courses right here. So welcome back. Today we are going to be doing our live session, and today's topic is very exciting, very important. How do I pass the AWS certification exam? So my name is Syed, and I'm an IT enterprise architect, and with me joining is Myra. She has her own channel, Myra in Tech, so go check that out also. So Myra is a senior DevOps engineer working for an enterprise company. So we'll give you some hands-on or real world knowledge and information on how to pass your AWS certification exam. So welcome, Myra. Thanks for joining. So
Yep,
I'll
I'm excited to this live again, and we're gonna be talking a lot about like AWS certifications and how to pass them today. So yep, if you guys have any questions, feel free to let us know, and we can continue with our conversation on that.
awesome. So before we actually dive deeper into how to pass, can we just briefly talk about what are the most important and pertinent, rather, certifications to have, especially if you're a beginner, for example, or even if you're an experienced, maybe a couple of years of experience within the cloud computing field, what which certifications is a must, and then which one is something that you should be um, getting into. So just kind of go over some of these.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a good question. So, because we're focusing on AWS certifications right now, AWS provides a bunch of certifications that you can take, and those vary from foundational level certifications to associate level certifications to professional level and then specialty level certifications, right? So, again, as these words say, this all really depends on at what level you are in that, AWS expertise. And if you're a beginner, you should start with the foundational certification because that will help you grasp the foundational concepts, the beginner level concepts that you need for that certification. That certification is basically the AWS Cloud Practitioner Certification exam. So what that does is basically again gives you all the fundamentals of AWS, all of its basic services, common services, and just gives you an idea of what the cloud is, right? Like what are you getting into? And like just getting yourself familiar with all the cloud terms and services, and just like that, the scale goes up. You move to the associate level certifications like the solutions architect associate, sysops administrator, or the developer associate. And when you take those, you kind of enhance your knowledge, right? You enhance your skills, you go one level above from the foundational level, and you learn so much more from AWS. And similarly, you move on to the professional level after the associate. And inside the professional level certifications, we have like the DevOps engineer professional. So if you're someone who's very much focused on DevOps, you should, pursue that DevOps professional certification. It's going to help you a lot in all the DevOps related stuff in AWS. From like code pipeline to all the the code and developer related tools and services. And then there's also another professional certification for the solutions architect. So what the solutions architect gives you is a very much understanding of the AWS architecture as a whole, right? Like all of the services of AWS as a whole. So if you're a cloud architect or a DevOps architect, having that certification will be great and very beneficial for you. And then after that, there comes this specialty certifications, which are like very niche specific certifications like security or networking or machine learning and all of those, right? But we can go into detail of any of these certification because I am like 5 times AWS certified. So I've given these and passed these exams myself, so I know what kind of questions you can expect, or what's the length of the questions, or what can you expect in the exam, right? So if anyone has any questions about certifications, the type of questions, or anything related to that, just feel free to mention those in the comments, and we'll reply back to you guys.
Certainly. So yeah, I think the by far the most popular that I've seen with my students and um, in general is the AWS Certified Solutions Architect, right? Which is really validating the knowledge that you're able to design and deploy scalable, fault tolerant, resilient, secure infrastructure, right? Now
Right.
that's of words, right? Because that's that covers a whole breadth of different aspects, and you need to be an expert with all these tools, or services such as EC2, S3, RDS, DynamoDB, VPCs, Route 53, because what you're in essence doing is basically designing an infrastructure for
Right.
the and not only that, sometimes I've also seen that these solutions architects, they go out in the field and meet customers, right, or have meetings with them, because they would then be explaining the architecture and what it does and what benefit does it provide, right? So by
Mm-hmm.
far, that's for the certified solutions architect. Now, this has two aspects. There's an associate level, and then there's a professional level. So the professional level certification is simply just going in depth, right? So it's more advanced, more complex scenarios. For example, if you are deploying or designing an architect multi-cloud, right? So you're working with Azure environments, you're working with Google Cloud, and you have AWS, right? So how do you actually
Mm-hmm.
design an infrastructure that covers all three cloud platforms? That's really where the professional would end up. But I think as a newbie, is just getting into AWS. The first um, is the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner, right? Because that's just the
Yeah.
basics, fundamentals of what you would learn. Um, and then, of course, there's earlier the SysOp, system admin or SysOp administrator. Then you have the DevOps engineer, which is, of course, the top tier, I call it, right? Because that covers,
Yeah.
you got to be able to know not only how to design, but deploy, manage, and secure the entire pipeline, right? The entire software development flow. And of course, some QA testing also, even though there's a whole different aspect to that. But typically, that's really what you're overseeing and you're monitoring all of that. So yeah, I guess my next question would be, all right. So once we have all these certifications, how do you pass? Like, what is, let's say if you or first let's talk about what types of questions um, are exam. Um, so you want
Yeah.
to talk about?
About that, right? So, like the AWS, certification, as we've just touched based on, there from foundational, associate to professional level, and as the this level increases, the type of questions and the length of question increases. So, for example, if we talk about the foundation, the most beginner level cloud practitioner exam, that one has really, really, really small and very to the point, basic, multiple choice questions, like in general, like very initial cloud concepts or AWS core services concepts. And you would just be asked, like, a simple question like, this customer wants to store some data, so what would be the storage service that you can use in AWS? Now, if you already have prepared for the exam for the cloud practitioner one, you would know that AWS provides these storage services, and if one of them is the one of the options that you have to choose, you would go ahead and choose that. So, for example, if there's a mention of S3, you're just going to quickly choose that, and your answer would be correct. So, those kind of simple basic questions is what you can expect in the foundational, the cloud practitioner exam and certification. However, as you move above the scale and, for example, move on to the solutions architect associate, you know exam and certification, what you can expect is those similar questions like the cloud practitioner exam, but a little bit more scaled up. Like you may be like asked to maybe talk about a configuration about an S3 bucket, or just go into more details about those services that were touched on the cloud practitioner exam. And again, the questions are about, like, I think 65 to 70 questions that you can expect in each certification. And the time also varies. For example, the cloud practitioner, because it's the very beginner level, they give you about, like, I think 1 hour or something. I'm not 100% exact sure on that. But, as the associate, you move on to the associate or professional level, you get a much more time duration, because the questions then get more lengthy and more very specific. So you have to give time to read those questions, understand those questions, and then think about them, because they're not just going to be those simple questions like what is S3, or what is EC2 instance, or what is a VPC. They're going to be giving you like scenario based questions, like, so this customer has this requirement, like they want to store their data, they want to have like a secure, like encrypted data, like the questions are very like lengthy and detailed. So you need to give each question some time to go through it, understand it, what are the exact requirements inside that question. And then once you understand it, then you look at the the options that you have for the answers. And the one thing I'll mention is that those answers and options that you have, they are very similar and very tricky. So that's why you also need to understand and look at those questions and those answers and make sure that you choose the right one. Because for example, when I gave the DevOps Engineer professional certification, I remember that one was very like complicated and very challenging, because the questions in that were like pretty lengthy, and I mean like I had to put a lot of focus and review all the questions so many times, go through them, and then understand the question and then answer them. So the type of questions, as just to answer again, like it would depend on the type of certification, but as the level increases, the complexity increases alongside those, and on the questions side.
Yeah, absolutely. So most of them are multiple choice questions and then choose the best answer. Um,
Right.
but by far, majority of the questions, I should say, or in level of difficulty, are the scenario-based questions, right? So you're
Yeah.
given a scenario or a statement or a problem, right? And then you have to choose from one of the four options typically. So
Right.
I just pulled up a sample question that I just like to go over. So um, everyone knows exactly what we're talking about. So the question is as follows, right? And I'm going to put it in the link, or you can go check out on our blog. They're all there, blog.claydesk.com. So you can take a look at all the sample questions there as well. So the question is, you are tasked with designing a high available and fault tolerant web application on AWS. The application is expected to have a large number of concurrent users, and downtime must be minimized. Which AWS service would you use to achieve this? Now, this, even though it's a small question, but it has three different aspects
So
to it, right?
terms that they have mentioned, like high availability, fault tolerant. So you need to know, like what tool or service can provide you that, right? Like what can provide you high availability, what can provide you fault tolerance, and all these things. Yeah, what would be the options that we would have for this?
Right. So, well, the options are also equally confusing because they all look the same, right? That's typically what the questions test you on. But one of the options is option A is use Amazon EC2 instances in multiple availability zone behind an elastic load balancer, and then use Amazon RDS for the database, and then configure multi-AZ replication. Use Amazon Cloud and delivery, and use Amazon S3 for storing static content. So that's
Mm.
just A, right? But notice that even the answers have like five different services, five different concepts.
Yep.
So how would you pass the exam? Well, the answer or the key is right here, because you need to be able to understand what these services do and how do they integrate with each other, right? How do they work with each other? And that's the only way that you'll be able to figure out. Well, if,
Right.
for example, question stated, hey, you have a large number of concurrent users and downtime must be minimized. So based on what one of this option answers, you ought to be able to know which service, for example, if you do multi AZ replication, how does that, what is the
Yeah.
effect of that? If you use Amazon RDS, what benefit does that provide? Does that allow you to have concurrent large number of users? The answer is yes. Um, and A, by the way, this is the right answer. So I'm
Yeah,
not going to test. This is
for sure. But
the
as you said, if someone does not know those terms that were mentioned even in the question or in the answer, it's going to be very tough for you. So, for example, CloudFront was mentioned, S3 was mentioned, RDS was mentioned, so many other like term or services of AWS were mentioned. So, even if you do not have an understanding of one of those, it's going to be tough for you to choose your answer, right? So, as you said, it's important to give the exam once you're comfortable and at that level where you can say that if I see any service in the question, I know what the purpose of that is, or you can just at least know that what that does, or you have used it. And that's like, I think, what we wanted to also discuss in this the steps that you need to follow before you can say that I'm going to go and give the certification and I'm going to pass it, right? So I think a lot of people question like, I want to pass the certification, but what are the exact steps that I should follow to achieve and pass that certification? So again, everyone that's watching, feel free to also put in the comments any questions that you have, and we will answer those in detail as much as we can. But I guess let's talk more on that, like how do you pass the certifications, how do you start your preparation for the exam?
Yeah. So the way I used to prepare and do these, of course, first you need to be able to do hands-on. So you have the knowledge. So let's say you've been practicing and you have the skill level already. So going through some of these sample questions, right, or some of the review guide, but there's certain steps to it. So the first step that I would um, recommend is review the exam guide. So AWS provides an exam guide. So you need to be able to know exactly how many questions are there, and the questions vary from exam to exam, right? And then
Mhm.
go questions. They have scenario-based questions. They have simple questions. Again, level of difficulty increases. So just review the exam guide. That's the first step to preparing for an AWS certification exam, is to review the exam guide, right, which provides a detailed description of the topic exam. So there are different domain areas, right? So domain one, and it will tell you the title of the topic, and then the number of questions that are going to be coming from this particular topic, right? So let's say 15% or 20% and so on. You just review the exam and then go through the detailed descriptions of the topics that are covered in the exam. The exam format is also important, like multiple questions or multiple choice questions or scenario based, right? So you need to go that, and that's all in the review guide. And then, of course, the recommended resources for studying. So, like I said, all these terms, all these AWS services, like CloudFront, for example, or RDS or DynamoDB, you need to be able to understand and, of course, make sure you're at that skill level. So that's the first step. And the second is taking a training.
Just to add on that, I would also say that yeah, all these things are 100% needed. Like look at the exam guide, like what are the questions, or the amount of questions and time that you would have. But the other thing that you should also take a look at it is like the actual content and the syllabus, because AWS provides like a syllabus or just like a content like a list of topics that you can expect and that you need to know before going into the certification exam. So those cover all the terms that we were kind of like mentioning in one of the questions, like high availability, security, networking, all the core services. All of these things are mentioned in on their website under each certification, and they tell you like these are the contents that you need to prepare for before going into the certification. So I think just like knowing that, going through that syllabus, going through that each topic one by one, and making sure that you are you can say yes to each. Like you can say, I know this one, I know this topic, I know this topic. Like you need to be aware of all of those before actually signing up for the certification. But yeah, that's like the first step that I think a person should do for starting preparing for a certification.
Yeah, great. Thanks for adding that point. Um, the second and how to pass the AWS certification exam is take a training course. So you can take courses everywhere. There's tons and tons of resources out there, um, and we full courses right here on YouTube or on our channel. So 6 hour course, 10 hour courses. We put all these courses for free, of course, right there on YouTube, that you can actually follow along. And these are all hands-on, by the way. So we typically create all of our courses as being hands-on. So we talk about a topic and then we show you a demo. So you can just kind of go follow along through that, and then
Mhm.
um, you can check out other sites and other areas as well. So the more you do it, the easier it'll become. So that's the second step is getting to know hands-on about all these different services.
Yeah, for sure. Because for everything, for every exam, even if it's like a tech certification or any other exam that you give in your life, you have to do the preparation, and there are different various ways to do that preparation. And one of the best one, as you just said, is like taking up courses. And now those again courses could be like some courses that you find online on a new website. You could also sign up on ClayDesk, or you could go look at YouTube, because everything's free on YouTube. So even at Clearest channel, we have so many free courses courses that you can check out without paying anything. So having those courses is a must for preparing for the certification. Now again, it's just not that you will have to enroll in one course and you will be like, now I know the certification, I can go in and give the certification. It's not like that. You have to enroll, you have to watch a lot of videos, a lot of courses, to get to that point where you can say that I can go ahead and give the certification. And to be honest, this is just not like a one day thing, right? Like you have to give it some time to prepare for the certification. Watch those courses, watch the content in the courses. As you mentioned, it's not only theory based, you have to do the hands on skills, which is the most important stuff. So this all takes time, but that is one of the best ways, because like watching videos and online courses, because you can take it at your own pace. You do not need to watch the whole 12-hour video in one day. You can just divide it into parts and watch some part of it one day, take notes, do the hands on, make sure that you are understanding the concepts, you are preparing for it, just like any other exam that you take in like your university or college or school. So that's how you need to prepare for it, right? For the actual certification exam also.
And getting your hands, or learning a new skill is nothing but practice, right? So you got to practice, practice, and practice. You know, just kind of continue practicing, um, multiple ways, with videos, watch different
Yeah.
and just so um, so that's the second part, right? So the total of 8 points. So we're on number two. Number three is read AWS documentation. I know that's a tough one because hey, we don't want to go through and open that PDF documentation and just kind of go through it. But let me tell you this, guys. This is by far very, very helpful, very, very productive because most of the areas, most of the terms, and most of the concepts that you may not otherwise find in those tutorials or hands on, you will be able to at least skim through and have or go through some of these, almost all of the concepts in the documentation. So you don't have to sort of like memorize everything, but just go through and read the documentation because it provides comprehensive text or documentation for all of its services. So what would
Mhm.
happen is read the documentation. It will help you gain a deeper understanding of the AWS services and how these services work and how they can, how they work in different scenarios. And that's the key point, right? So you have to be able to know that, for example, if you're using RDS, how does RDS fit into a fault tolerant scenario? How does RDS fit into minimizing cost, for example, or you're going to be using DynamoDB as your database, right? So this documentation will give you the ability to understand different ways you can deploy these services within a given architecture. So yeah, reading it is also very important.
Yeah, 100%. I think because when you will be doing the hands-on skills, like when you will be practicing in the AWS console, like there will be times like you would be like, oh, this is a new service or this is a new configuration. Like, what are the options do I have, or why is this configuration there, right? So to answer these questions, AWS documentation is the best. You could just search, copy, and paste that term or service, in the documentation, like, find it, and then you could just learn about it, right? So this is like, as you said, like the documentation is really helpful. You don't have to read all of it, because again that will just be a lot, and not a good thing as such. But again, you can always take help from it for different terms, for different services, and just read through it, like, and just grasp some of the concepts that are mentioned in the documentation.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. All right, let's move on to number four, right? So number four is how do you pass the AWS certification exam? We're at number four, the total of 8 points. So four is practice with AWS services. It kind of goes hand in hand with uh,
Yeah, me too.
hands-on,
Hmm.
but hands-on experience working with AWS service is essential for passing the certification exam because you know exactly how things work. And it does provide a free tier account, by the way, right? So it gives you 750 hours per year. So there's plenty of free hours that you can actually use the Amazon platform and then gain hands-on experience. All right, number five is taking practice exams.
Yeah,
Now,
I think that's one of the most major ones.
major.
That very important. Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead. You want to talk about that, and then
Yeah,
I'll
yeah, talk about that. So yeah, I think that's one of the major important steps during the process of taking and passing the AWS certifications. Practice exams are a must because they help you a lot in understanding again the type of questions you can expect. What are the things mentioned in the questions? You just get comfortable with the exam, so right, so practice exams are like the best thing that you need to do before going into the certification. And you can just take those practice exams to like gauge yourself, right? Like time yourself just like the actual certification, go through like those practice exams and kind of like test yourself. So if you do feel like in the end that you are at the level where you can pass that certification, you have a good score even in your practice exams, then you can go ahead with the certification. However, again, practice exams are the best to just get yourself comfortable with the exam, the type of questions, and just like getting yourself comfortable before going into the actual certification. And then you can find like again those practice dumps, practice exams, a lot of them online. I think we also have them on our Udemy for ClayDesk, so you could also check them out. And there are different ways, but practice exams is like one of the, I would say, main step that's necessary.
yeah. And you mentioned the word called dumps, right? So they're pretty cool. Even though most of the time they go all over the place, right? So if you
Yep.
are certain questions that are similar that come in the exam, so you go find the AWS dumps and you just kind of go through the questions. Sometimes they help and sometimes they don't. So I would not totally rely on them, but at least they give you a good idea, a good understanding of what the questions are like, different scenario based questions. So um, you can certainly go through that and work with them as well. All right. So point number six, how to pass the AWS certification exam is join a study group. Um, that it's certainly good to have other colleagues of yours that are preparing for the exam. It certainly helps because you share ideas. If there's an issue or a problem, then you kind of talk it through, or you research or find the answers together, right? So that would be a collaborative effort in terms of joining a study group and similar like-minded individuals who are studying and want to pass the exam. So you can
Yeah.
share the uh, terms, scenarios, questions, and so forth. So um, that'd be something worthwhile.
Yeah, no, I think those study groups, yeah, and if you don't like you really have like study groups as itself, right? You could always, just go online. There are like so many communities that you can find, like on LinkedIn or any other like social media platforms, which like kind of like help you, just like you could ask people questions or just, kind of like get together, maybe have a meeting or something, go through some practice exams, or, just again get yourself comfortable with what type of questions you can expect and all those things around that. So yeah, I think like those things can help you in the end, like where you are, just need some like more people who are giving the same thing or preparing for the same thing that you are preparing for, just getting yourself being comfortable and understanding some of the concepts, or maybe just asking that, oh, I did all this preparation, am I missing something, right? Or do you have any other feedback or advice that, or do you have any other special notes or any other special documentation that you think I should look at before going into the certification? But yeah, all these steps, go through them, make sure that you prepare practice yourself, test yourself, gauge yourself. And if you feel like you've reached that level where you feel like you passed the practice exams, go ahead, sign up for the certification, and you will pass it, because that's the same steps I also followed and many others follow in this industry to pass the certifications. So again, these are the ideal steps. If you go through these, if you do prepare for it properly, do all the things that we mentioned, then you will pass the exam for sure.
Definitely. So with that said, last couple of points are focus on the exam objectives, and then of course your time during the exam. So we'll talk about time a little later as the last point. But focusing on the exam objective is important because otherwise you'll be going all over the place, right? So if you're preparing for, say, AWS Certified Solutions Architect exam, then the domain areas that are provided in AWS, they are not going to test you and ask you on other services that are not part of those domain knowledge areas. So make
Yeah.
sure you do the exam objectives, right? So that will help you, uh, you know, uh, focus more on passing the exam and learning only those services that are part of the exam objective, right? So you're not preparing for something that's not going to be on the exam itself. And I've seen many students who actually go all over the place and then they're overwhelmed and then they, appear for the exam and then they say, well, this doesn't, appear in the exam. This question was, I prepared for it, but it didn't come in the exam. Well, you got to understand the exam objectives so that you can stay focused on that.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because I think that's a good point. Because like even when you're preparing and you go through practice exams and all of these things, don't expect that you'll get the same questions in the exam, or don't expect that you if you just do the practice exams and you pass them, you can also pass the certification. You need that knowledge, you need that experience of learning, you need that hands-on skills, you need that overall understanding of all the services and all the AWS concepts before going into the certification. And the questions, they can change every time. So if you have a good understanding overall, if you can read through the questions, understand the what it's asking you, understand what questions it's asking you, then I would say you would be able to pass the a certification. But don't just expect that if you just study for like a little bit and then take some practice exams and go for it. It won't be that easy. You need to give it some time, spend some time in learning that content that you can expect in the certification. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think that was a point.
absolutely. And that brings us to the last point in how to pass the AWS certification exam is managing your time duration during the exam, and that's very
Yeah.
very critical. I've seen many students, they know their stuff, but guess what? They run out of time. They only give you 90 minutes or 60 minutes or whatever time allocated. And then you're just stuck at a scenario based question, which is a long question, and then, you eat up most of the time. So, the way, for example, I would, when I took these exams and passed, I would just go through each question. And at any point in time, if I come across a scenario based question, for example, or if it's a long question and I'm not sure about it, I would just skip it, flag it, and then move on to the next one. So I would just go through the entire exam, answer the ones that I really, really know, 100% sure that the answers are correct, and then come back to the whatever questions I have flagged, right? So managing your time is very, very important because you get about a couple of minutes per question, right? Something like that, or 3 minutes per question. So sometimes you just answer right away. Sometimes you have to kind of read the question, think about the services and all the scenarios, and then find the answers and read the answers also, right? So managing your time is very critical. You need to manage your time carefully to ensure that your answers, you can answer all of the questions. I've had students who know their stuff, but they were unable to complete and answer all the questions. So they didn't pass on the first attempt, and then they, of course, practice and then they pass on the second attempt, right? So these are the key points that I think. So anything you want to add about managing how, Mara, tell us about how when you took the exams, how did you manage your time?
Yeah, I think I did a similar thing that you mentioned. Like once you go start with this exam, there will be like 60 to 70 questions that you can have, right? And the duration can be less according to, again, the length of the questions. So again, that's literally what I did. Also, I went through all of the questions one by one, and if I saw that there's a question which is like totally out of something out of my comfort zone, and I'm like, oh, this is something new, or like this can be a little challenging for me to quickly answer, you have the option to flag questions, which is the best thing, right? So you can flag questions as you go. So go through all of those exams one by answer questions one by one till the end. Flag the ones which you feel like you can come back to later and give more time if you have, right? And then that's literally the pattern that I followed. So go through all of the questions, look at the time at the end, and you probably will have a lot of time for the review, right? So it's not like that you have like 1 minute per question. If you do not take one, if you take 2 minutes on one question, you're gonna get your timed over. It's not that. You still have always like some room in the end for like review and just going through the questions again. But that's the step, like flag the ones which you feel like are quite a little challenging for you, and then in the end give them some time and then look at the answers and just maybe think about it more and answer them. And again, like passing the certifications, it's not necessary that you get 100 out of 100, like when that certification pass it. Like there's a passing percentage. I think, like, as far as I remember, it was about like 70 to 75% if you want to pass the certification, right? So this is important. Like don't like be overwhelmed that you need to answer everything. It's okay to have some questions which you are not sure of, because again, it is an exam. That is what you can expect in it. So but you should be able to at least have a good percentage to pass that certification. And the good thing is that they tell you the result almost right away. So you not have to wait for so long to get the result of your exam, and then just be like stressed all around that. So you get the answer, like the result right away after giving the exam, if you passed it or not. So again, that's why the preparation is important, timing yourself is important, testing yourself is important, and practicing for the exam is super important, because these are all the things that will actually help you pass, right? And then you won't be even stressed. You will be like, I know the answer, I know the certification, I already prepared for it. So what can be wrong in that? So these are the things I would say, just look at before going into the certification. But
It's always
yeah,
that last
yeah.
finish, heart is pumping, and you're saying, "Well, I'm not gonna pass," or whatever, right? And then, of course,
Yep.
the right on your screen. So yeah, awesome. So I hope you guys like what we talked about and how to pass the AWS certification exam. We also talked about, to summarize, to conclude this session, we talked about different types of certifications, the important ones, and then, of course, how to pass. And we give you 8 steps. So those are: review the exam guide, take the training course, read the AWS documentation, take the practice exams, practice with AWS services, focus on the exam objectives, join a study group, and then manage your time during the exam. So, with that, I hope this helps. Let us know if you have any questions or comments. Leave comments so we know exactly what you're studying, what you're going through, what you're preparing for, and we'll be happy to answer those. So I'd like to thank Myra for joining us. Thank you, Myra, for giving us insight into how to pass the certification exams. And once you pass one, like Myra is 5 times certified AWS, it's easier to then you get the hang of things, right? And then you're just on a roll. So yeah, thank you so much, Mara, for being here, and thank you all for being here also.
Yep. Thank you so much, everyone. And again, if you have any other questions, you can always comment down under any of our videos. And we will be doing more of these lives and talking about more topics. So, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned, like, for, more videos. But again, thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks.